Hey everyone, it's Evil Monkey here, and I'm back with the Luna Support Build Guide. Now before we hop in this video, I gotta say sorry I haven't made any videos recently. I had back-to-back family things come up that took priority over pretty much everything else. But I'm back to making videos, starting off once again with this Luna Support Guide. And the cool thing about this video is that we're gonna be covering not one, not two, but three different Luna Support builds. And the cooler part is, all three builds are pretty much going to use the same set of modules. So if you build one of them, you've basically built all three, with there being very little difference between how you're actually going to do the builds outside of the transient mods. But that's enough of me yapping. Let's go and get you guys straight into that build so you guys can get out there with it. As always, we first got to start off with the mod section of the video. And as I stated in the intro, this video will actually cover three different builds, each one centered around a different transient mod for support Luna. And luckily, even though the transient mods are changing, the rest of the mods relatively remain the same, with maybe only one or two mods changing, and this is due to each of the different builds pretty much all needing the same stats, and following almost all the same logic of why they need those stats. Now because of that, most of the logic will be explained in the first build we'll cover, which should be Nimble Footsteps, but once we get to each different build, I will also go ahead and cover different logic of why we're doing different mods or when to use this build and where the differences. But most of the time I will reference back to that first build. But hey, that's enough of me yapping. Let's go ahead and get you guys straight into the mod section of this build. So the first of the three builds we gotta go over is Nimble Footsteps. Now, this will be kind of your general use version of the skill power buffing Luna version, since we'll also be covering a firearm buffing version. But this will mainly be for like all skill power use and ability use. Now, the reason why this is kind of your general use and the one I recommend mainly while you're playing with randoms is because this one will expand out your range and give you movement speed, which will definitely help you keep up with all the people going in different directions. As you guys probably know if you played support before, it is hard to keep up with teammates and constantly buff them, because they will just run away from you in different directions. So having the massively increased range and movement speed will massively help you keep up with your teammates and give them the buffs they need. Now the only kind of downside, and I say kind of because there's a benefit to this that we'll talk about later, you do get animation locked with this one when you use an enhanced buff. But once again, this is kind of a mixed bag version. I'll explain a little bit later in this build why that's so. But the only downside to it is you really can't give other buffs outside the buff you're currently giving while you're animation locked. But let's go ahead and jump into the different sections of this build. But first we gotta cover the MP section, and for this we're running HP conversion and enlightenment. Now, the reason why we're running MP, if anyone's curious, because we are running quite a bit, it's because all of Luna's buffs actually scale off MP, and not skill power, meaning you want as much MP as possible. Now, the max amount of MP you can get to convert into a buff is 1000 MP, and this build can get around that. Now, I'll go into the actual numbers in a second, but basically the reason we're running these two is because this is actually the two highest MP mods you can get, along with the support tech one, which we'll cover in a minute. Now, this build will get to roughly 950 out of 1000 if you follow every exact mod on this page. Now, there is one substitution of a mod you can do, and we'll cover this in the cooldown section, that you can do to actually get 1000 MP. But it does come with a downside that I'll explain in the next section, which we'll just go ahead and hop into right now. Now for the cooldown mods of this build. So for this, we're going to be running MP Conversion, Nimble Fingers, Focus on Non-Attribute, and Focus on Singular. Now, there's a lot of very weird things probably about this that you guys may not understand, so let me go ahead and explain all these kind of weird things and mainly why we're running cooldown here. So for anyone who doesn't know, Luna's second and third ability on successful note hit actually reset the ability's cooldowns back to 0, so you immediately can reuse them. But the main reason we're running cooldown in this is actually revolving around Luna's fourth ability, because this gives a massive buff of when you enhance it, it will actually give your whole team cooldown reduction, which is insane. Especially considering most characters can't naturally hit max cooldown, this kind of gets them closer to it, if not let them hit it. The other big reason why you constantly want to be able to use your fourth ability is getting to your enhanced notes without your fourth ability's help is actually fairly slow, because you have to hit every note, and you kind of get animation locked to where when you, for example, spam your second ability, you can only hit about 2 out of every 3 notes, and sometimes only 1 out of every 3 notes. Versus your 4th ability, which actually changes your gun to allow that to hit the notes instead and get you to your enhanced buffs really quickly, because it will just, every shot on note will actually increase your inspiration gauge, allowing you to instantly fill your bar, taking only about 2 to 3 seconds around there, versus if you were to just spam like your second ability, that would take closer to 6 to 8 seconds. And the main reason you want this is also so that you can try and have your enhanced buffs up as much as possible, since those are your big time buffs. Now, the other kind of confusing thing is I just got through talking about MP and why we need very high MP to be able to get the max amount of buffs. And so it may be confusing why we're running MP conversion, which actually takes away MP. So this is the module I was actually saying you could exchange out if you don't want cooldown as much. And you could change it out for time distribution, which also gives you some cooldown to still be able to use your 4th ability. And this will allow you to hit max MP of over 1,000 to get your maximum buffs. But I'd more recommend MP conversion, because this just allows you to have the highest uptime of 2 enhanced buffs, which is much better than, just having a singular enhanced buff. That is an optional thing though, but it's not a big thing to have minus 50 MP like we have. So we have, like I said earlier, about 950 MP versus having over 1,000. It won't change your buffs that much. Instead, it'll be much, much more important to be able to have your 4th ability constantly up, so you can give yourself buff to be able to instantly trigger another enhanced ability. So enhanced buffs, way more important than that just 50 mana difference. But once again, if you for whatever reason want just the maxed out skill power buff, or let's just say maybe for whatever reason you're going for a cooperative one shot against a boss, then it makes sense to take away the MP conversion and throw in a different module such as time distribution. But once again, cooldown is greater than that 50 mana that you're missing. Now we gotta talk about our duration. So for this, we're gonna run skill extension and maximize duration. Now, maximize duration is pretty good here because, once again, all of our buffs scale off of our MP, so we really don't care about skill power modifier going down. Even though, yes, you'll do a little bit of damage with your gun, well, your unique gun here, it won't really matter too much. You're mainly there to be giving your allies a whole bunch of buffs, and really good ones at that. But the main reason why we're running duration here over anything else is because, once again, we want our enhanced buffs to last as long as possible, mainly so that we can try and overlap them and have 2 concurrent enhanced buffs going, which will make your allies really, really, really strong. Because these buffs allow you to do some pretty incredible things, since they buff skill damage, or skill crit damage, skill crit rate, and also cooldown. And one other one gives MP back, along with reducing custom resource cost. All those buffs are really good, so you just want them to be as long as possible. And now time for our ultimate module here. Now this one is a support tech one, and we're running Arche Concentration. Now the reason why I'm running this is because this is a stacking module and Luna spams out abilities fairly quickly. But the big thing from this one is that you get MP up. And this is very important because, once again, your buffs scale off of max MP. And this one is pretty incredible at that, since it gives you 39% additional MP at max value. And that's pretty huge. That's the largest amount any of the mods will give you. In fact, I believe it's the largest scaling one anything in the game will give you. Now, it does take a bit to actually get to that max value, but this will let you get the max amount of buffs you can. This will be especially good for something like a boss fight, because you can stack it while the boss is loading in. And it also just lets you, as the fight goes on, in pretty much any portion of the game, your buffs will get better and better and better. With the only downside here being, you will technically have movement speed down, but there are ways that we can counter that. Although most of the time that won't affect you too much, but we do have ways to counter that. In fact, Nimble Footsteps here gives you more movement speed, which will help counteract it. Now, one other thing these 3 builds all share is the trigger module and the Ancestor module. So instead of explaining in each of the 3 builds, At the end of the 3 builds, there will be a section for both trigger and ancestor modules. Will explain both and which ones will be optimal. Now, if you guys want to go ahead and jump to that, there will be a timestamp below the video in the description, or there will also be one in the timeline of the video itself. Okay, now for the Singer's Mercy version. Now, once again, the mods don't change much, but the logic kind of changes why we're running some of these. So, Singer's Mercy, though, is going to mainly be used, I'd say, more in coordinated parties. This is because even though you're able to set up several drones, the enhanced drones, once they give you your enhanced buffs, will be pretty limited of the number you can throw out because of cooldowns and everything. And to be honest, you'll probably normally throw them out in the same location, which will allow you to tell your teammates, hey, enhanced buffs going right here in this location, and you can't really communicate that to other random teammates who you aren't in like comms with. So this is more of a team coordinated one, I'd say. Now, there are some other benefits. Number one, compared to Nimble Footsteps, you don't get animation locked, which means you can just continuously work on your buffs. Now, I did say before that Nimble Footsteps kind of has like a benefit to being animation locked, but that doesn't apply for this one because the benefit for Nimble Footsteps was the fact that if you got animation locked, as you were in the animation, you continuously gave out the enhanced buff, and that time also ate into your cooldowns. Meaning, when your fourth ability was on cooldown, it was actually, when you ended the animation, instead of having its normal 6-second cooldown, it was about a 3 to 2-second cooldown left. Instead, for this one, you just immediately just throw out the enhanced buff drone, and you can continue working on the next buff. So, that's pretty much the big benefit from this one. There's also one other downside to this, outside of, needing coordination, and that's the duration for your second enhanced buff actually is less than it would be normally. But that's the only downside, and it shouldn't affect it too much, since if people just run out of the buff, and the drones last about 13-ish seconds, they can just run back into the drones, get rebuffed, and continue on. Now, starting off with our first set of mods, we're going to be running the same MP mods here, and I covered why we were running those previously, but just once again, we are running the most amount of max MP we can, so that we can go ahead and get the highest buffs we can give out, which just would affect skill power increase that you can give from your second ability. Now, for our cooldown mods, it's a little bit more important to have cooldown in Singer's Mercy, because once again, you're not having any of your cooldown eaten up by any animation lock. So you really do need that lower cooldown, especially so you can spam out your fourth ability a little bit more to be able to get all your other buffs continuously at their enhanced level. Because once again, the enhanced buffs are incredibly important. And then for duration, it's the same reason. Just make your buffs last as long as possible, but on the other side of this, or the extra benefit you could say, is that it also extends out the length of your drones. So it's doubly important here because you want your drones to basically last as long as possible so people can just have time to run into them and get their buffs. And then for our ultimate module, this is also the same logic. It's just the best one that gives you the stacks for your MP and the most MP from any module. The only issue is this compared to Nimble Footsteps is Nimble Footsteps gave you movement speed, and the drones don't give you any movement speed. So you will be slower with this, which is actually one of the bigger downsides of Singer's Mercy. This is definitely a more stationary build because you're not as mobile, you're not carrying the buffs with you. Once again, this is also another reason why it's much better for a coordinated team than a team full of random players. This will be more of a specialized transient mod that you can use for more specific scenarios. And once again, for our trigger module and our ancestor module, these will be done in a different section after I go over all 3 builds, since all 3 builds will use the same sets of trigger modules and the same ancestor module. So if you guys want to skip to that, there is a timestamp below the video, and then of course in the timeline there's also a section you can just go and click on that. And now time for the final version of this build, which is the aggressive melody version. Now this is one you're going to run if your team's running firearm attack, since this will buff not only the firearm attack damage, but also crit damage, crit rate, and weak point damage, which is massive. Now, you're probably mainly also going to run this with, 3 other Serenas. But okay, no, all jokes aside, this is pretty ideal because not many things in the game actually give you additive stats, especially for weak point damage and crit rate. So this is really ideal for you to be able to run with your team. It can help them hit maximum crit rate and just overall do a lot more damage. Now, the upside of the Aggressive Melody is not only do you get the base stat of your duration on your second and third ability, which are decently high, it also improves your fourth ability's enhanced buffs duration, meaning this becomes a lot easier to have permanent uptime on your second and fourth abilities' enhanced buffs, which is massive. But overall, for these mods, it'll pretty much follow the same logic as the other two, but instead of giving you, things that affect your skills, this will instead give you things that affect your gun damage. So our first set of mods we gotta go over here are your MP mods. Now, all the logic of these mods, since they're pretty much the same, are going to be similar as what we ran in Nimble Footsteps. So if you guys want the logic of why we're running each individual mod, jump into Nimble Footsteps. But the only difference you guys need to really understand here is that for MP, you guys are instead getting firearm attack up instead of skill power up. Now, the downside is the firearm attack up isn't as significant of an impact as the skill power up, but it is just additional damage for your buffs, so you still want to run MP, even if it's not as significant. Which means that something like in our cooldown, which we'll go ahead and jump into now, MP conversion doesn't have as much of an impact for you having minus MP. In fact, it's just allowing you to keep up your enhanced buffs is even more significant. Now there is one other difference here in your cooldowns is you can remove either focus on tech or focus on non-attribute here and replace it with a range up if you're having trouble hitting your allies. Now, the reason you can do that is, as we said before, your fourth ability has a longer duration, which helps with you keeping up your enhanced buffs, so you don't need as much cooldown as you do for the other two versions of the build that relied on skill power. And then for our next section, duration, same as before. This one, we just want enhanced buffs to last as long as possible. These actually have an even greater impact because once again, your fourth ability has that longer duration. And then for our ultimate mod here, we're running Arche Concentration to try and get that highest possible value of MP. The other upside of Arche Concentration is that you do get defense stats as well, so you are slightly tankier. You're less likely to go down. And then for our Trigger module and Ancestor module, once again, we'll cover those in two different sections. If you guys want to jump right into those, there's a link in the description, or you can just click the section in the timeline of the video. Now, as one final note for this firearm support build that I want to mention is even though that firearm damage up isn't super significant here, the most important version of this build is the enhanced buffs, because these enhanced buffs give incredible stats. Just getting additive stats is amazing. So your main point on this firearm build is just to keep up those enhanced buffs of your second and fourth ability permanently. And probably every once in a while throw in an enhanced third ability, just so that you can keep everyone's MP topped off. But second and fourth are your highest priority here. Now that we've gone over all the main modules in all three builds, let's go ahead and hop over to the trigger modules. As I said before, there are two different trigger modules that I recommend for this build. The first being my personal favorite, Particle Conversion Emitter, and the reason being is Luna can stack this incredibly fast, since she can spam out a buff about at least once every second or so. And this just stacks it really quickly and gives extra damage to your teammates, and as I said before, damage is king currently for Descendant. Everyone wants damage, and even doing a little bit extra damage can help a lot. Now the other one you can run is Rhythmic Step. Now this is one I said if you want to counter the movement speed debuff from Arche Concentration you can run, since this one gives you stacking movement speed as long as you're hitting your notes correctly. And if you're playing Luna, you gotta hit your notes correctly. Now the other benefit of running Rhythmic Step is the fact that it also gives you max shield, which is pretty nice if you're running a little bit low on tankiness. You can run this as well. Now my recommendation of when to run each one, Particle Conversion Emitter is perfect when you need extra damage and you're not having to chase after your teammates. For example, you're running a 4-man team into a boss, like an abyssal boss or any challenge bosses, you're trying to hit a record with that, this works perfectly because you're not chasing after your teammates. This also is good in a dungeon where you have to use your bike, since mainly you're using your bike to get to one section to another and you're not actually moving around much in those areas. Rhythmic Step is perfect if you're having trouble keeping up with your teammates in a dungeon where you're having to run long distances, the dungeon itself is long. Basically, anytime you're just having to run on foot. And once again, you're having trouble keeping up with your allies, or if you need a little bit extra tankiness from your defense. But these are the two trigger modules I recommend, so choose whichever one you prefer. They both work perfectly with the build. So for the Ancestor module section of this build, we're trying something new here, and I want you guys to let me know down below the video what you think of this. But this idea comes from the fact that it'll be next to impossible for you to roll a perfect Ancestor module. So instead, what we're going to do is take every stat that you could roll for the Ancestor module and put it into different tiers, creating a chart that you guys can reference to determine if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to re-roll it. So starting with S tier, which will be our best tier here, we have Max MP, which once again, this is for just making your buff stronger, and in fact with this, having just even a little bit, I believe it's around 3%, can cause you to give max buffs to your team, since Luna caps out at 1000 MP for being able to give a buff. And skill duration up. Now this is once again because we want our enhanced buffs to last as long as possible, so you have the highest uptime. Now moving down to A tier, which is still a pretty good tier, we have skill cooldown, which I almost put in S tier, but I feel like this is more of A tier due to the fact that we already have enough cooldown to build. But rolling some extra cooldown here can help you just get your fourth ability up faster, or even potentially allow you to maybe take out a module or replace a module. Then we have skill effect range, which just allows you to hit your allies easier with these buffs. Now to B tier, which is kind of our mid-range tier, we have max HP, max shield, defense. Now this is all just for extra tankiness, so you have better survivability, which is never bad, but in this build it's not like a god tier stat. And then we also have skill cost, which as we said, you just kind of want to be able to lower the cost of all of your abilities, so you don't have to swap to your third ability to regenerate your MP. But this isn't such a great stat that it goes in A or S tier. So B tier because it's kind of a mid-range one. Now C tier, this is the tier you're gonna just barely make the cut. This doesn't greatly help the build, but it's not so bad that it hurts the build or is a dead stat. And this is going to be tech skill power, tech skill modifier, and non-attribute power boost ratio. This is because Luna's gun, well, her unique gun, scales off of tech and non-attribute. And you will be using that with your fourth ability, so you will be doing some slight damage with it. So this just kind of helps increase that damage, even if it is fairly low damage. Now D tier, I like to think of D tier as do not take as a positive stat. This is the stat tier that if you want to take a minus value or a negative value, go ahead and take it from D tier, as taking a negative value of anything in this tier will not hurt the build, but taking a positive will do absolutely nothing for the build. Now, this one's going to have singular skill power and singular skill modifier. This is because even though, yes, each of Luna's second, third, and fourth ability, all of her notes, do scale off singular, they actually have 0 skill power scaling, or at least nothing that will help you. Since all their buffs scale off MP, these are actually dead stats. So it actually does nothing to take singular skill, since her unique gun once again scales off tech. And then skill critical hit rate and skill critical damage, well, you're running no crit in the build, and crit's not really going to do anything because you're trying to buff your allies instead of doing the max amount of damage you can do. So these are also dead stats. And hopefully, with this tier chart, you guys can once again, reference if your module is good or not, and this will hopefully help you try and get the best Ancestor module possible. Once again, let me know down below the video what you guys thought of this section, if you guys would like to see some more videos, or if this didn't really work for you. Now for your Arche Tree here, much of the logic here is kind of similar to what we were running in our mods. So pretty much all we're going to grab here is we're going to grab as much MP as possible so that we can get those buffs enhanced to the highest value. Cooldown, so you're definitely going to want that gold cooldown node so you can cycle through especially your fourth ability as much as possible. The duration nodes, once again, you want your enhanced buffs to last as long as possible, We're also going to grab MP recovery here because even though, yes, Luna does have built-in MP recovery, you don't really want to be on your third ability too much, because if you're on that ability, you're not really giving out too many buffs to your allies that are going to increase their damage. And right now in the meta for Descendant, damage is king. And then, finally there at the bottom, we are also going to take some costs down. Now once again, this is just so you don't have to cycle to your third ability as much, but if for whatever reason you're having survivability issues, you can instead remove the costs down and just get HP up to help with survivability. And then for our mutant cell here, we're going to use Fight Song. Now why is this one? Once again, we want as much MP as possible, and this one gives us MP every time we buff an ally. And this is additive MP, which means it's going to affect our base, which is going to further enhance any of the multiplicative MP ones we get later on. Thus, this is just kind of the best one you can run. So for our component sets, you're actually going to have two different options that you can run here, with our first option being the recommended one that will give you the best buffs possible, and then our second option will be more of a unique scenario set that we'll talk about when we get to that one. But for our first option that we have here, you're actually, instead of running a full 4 set, going to run two sets. Now the reason being is because Circulation, which its 2 set bonus is plus 28 MP, and this is additive, is really important to get to help you get as high as buff as possible. In fact, with an Ancestor module giving you multiplicative MP, you can actually get the capped out buffs fairly easily with this build. But the reason we don't run the full 4 set for Circulation is because it only works with charge skills, and Luna doesn't have a charge skill. So instead we just take the 2 set here for the stats, and then on top of that, we're also going to run another 2 set, Firebrand, here, because Firebrand also gives 2 stats that we really want from its 2 set, which is range, so you can hit your allies easier with those buffs, and then also duration, so that your enhanced buffs can last as long as possible. Now, technically, if you want to do a different set over Firebrand here, you can, because there are other 2 set bonuses that give really good stats, such as cooldown, but Firebrand's 2 set is actually pretty high value here. Now for our other option of component sets that you can run the full 4 set of Hungry Sonic. Now, this one is kind of nice because it gives you MP recovery and stacking MP, but it's multiplicative instead of additive, which is significantly worse, and it's only about a 30% multiplicative value. The other effect though that Hungry Set has is the reason that you kind of want to run this in a more unique scenario, and that is for the healing it gives. Now, every 10 seconds, as you're at max stacks, you actually heal your allies for about 10 to 11% HP every time you buff them. Now this is really nice because in a lot of the newer dungeons, enemies have been hitting a lot harder, and I've been noticing a lot of people going down a lot easier. So having a 10% HP heal on a 10-second cooldown actually can allow your team to stay up longer so no one goes down, so they have more DPS they're able to do, and you can clear the dungeon faster. Now, once again, this is only in the scenario that you believe your team's going to go down, or maybe you're frustrated with some of the random people you've been teaming up with going down constantly, and this is the heal that can kind of help keep them alive. Now, for your sub modifiers that you're going to run your components, same thing as we've pretty much been running everywhere else, it's going to be max MP, MP recovery modifier, MP recovery in combat, and MP recovery out of combat, which follows the same logic we've had elsewhere: max MP for more damage in your buffs, MP recovery modifier in combat recovery, and MP out of combat, all just so you don't have to swap to that third ability and waste time getting your other enhanced buffs out. Outside of, being able to swap to your third ability to get your third ability's enhanced buff out, which isn't a bad ability, but you just don't want to have to shoot your gun in your third ability, since it will slow down you getting out your second and fourth abilities enhanced buffs, or any other enhanced buffs. Now, for your component cores though, what you're going to want to run here is 4 max HP and 2 defense. And then the other 2 can be free slots, depending on what you're fighting. Since Luna is a support, and she's also not attribute, she can kind of fit in with any team against any enemy. So you can just kind of change those out for whatever you want to, depending on what you're fighting. You could even just have 4 defense if you want there. There is one additional note I do want to make here though. If you're running Rhythmic Step as your trigger module, that actually does give you stacking max shield. So if you want to, you actually can swap out the HP for shield. This is just a preference of which one you want to run. It works either way. I run HP because that way I could run either of the trigger modules. I don't have to swap out sets depending on it. For our Inversion Reinforcement in this build, there's actually only one node that really matters, and that's Neural Focus Augmentation. You'll go ahead and want to take that one, since this gives us stacking MP. The other two, you're free to choose kind of whatever you want to. I recommend taking something that increases your survivability or defense. Like I run Probabilistic Recovery System and Deploy Hardened Shell, which is going to help me survive with this build. But yeah, pretty much only thing that matters is Neural Focus Augmentation. Next up is your Reactor. For your Reactor, you're going to want to run non-attribute tech. The reason being is, of course, Luna is a non-attribute character, and her only ability that actually does damage is her gun, which scales off tech. And then for your sub-attributes here, you're going to want to run duration up and cooldown. Now, this is pretty much the same reason we've gone over throughout the entire build. Duration, just make your enhanced buffs last longer, and cooldown so you can get your fourth ability up as much as possible. None of the other substats really do anything, so these are kind of the two best ones you're going to be able to get for a support build. And now time for the how-to and tips section. Now, I wanted to make this section to kind of help you guys be able to play this build a little bit easier, since there's a couple things that aren't super clear or aren't said pretty much anywhere in the builds or the mods. So the first one I want to show you guys was the reason why we keep wanting cooldown for your fourth ability. Now, if we go to like a different ability here, you can only hit the notes on beat, which you can only hit about one out of every 2, sometimes 1 out of every 3. But you can't use your gun here to hit it, so you get no notes. Same with your third ability, same thing. But if we go to our fourth ability, you can actually use your gun here to hit every note, which is really nice because that means you can hit every single note and have back-to-back enhanced buffs going. This allows you to hit it really, really fast. Also, if you're an enhanced fourth ability, you get 2 notes instead. And it's just a really nice way, once again, to constantly have your enhanced buffs, which, as I said several times throughout this video, is incredibly important. Now, the other thing I wanted to discuss was your Arche Concentration mod here. Now, for most people, you may know that Arche Concentration, your stacks actually drop when you use a grapple hook, like so, or when you roll. But most dungeons actually now let you use a bike, and it turns out, when you hop on your bike, Arche concentration stacks don't drop. They stay at the amount that you went on. And this is just a really nice way so that you can, keep up your Arche concentration stacks, keep up the maximum buffs from section to section. Once again, especially in the new dungeons, which allow you to use your bike. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about actually relates to the MP buffs. Well, your buffs from your max MP. There are 2 ways with this build you're going to hit max MP. I've kind of discussed this throughout this video, but I thought I'd go over it one more time. The first route is you just run the build as is, but do not run MP conversion. The downside of this is you won't get the cooldown you need to constantly use your fourth ability, but this will actually let you hit 1000 MP, actually over that, to be able to get your max buffs. Now, the other route is you go the recommended build that's been throughout this video. You still keep in MP conversion, but you have to get max MP on your Ancestor module. If you run the build as is and get that max MP on your Ancestor module, you will be able to get the max buffs. And that's it for the tips section. Those are just things that'll kind of help you be able to use this build to its max potential. And that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for the Luna support build video. Let me know what you guys thought about the build down in the comments below. Or if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and hit me up down below as well. I'll try to respond to those as fast as possible. Also, if you guys enjoyed the video or plan to use the build, I appreciate you hitting that like button. It does help the video a lot, get out to more people. And if you want to be notified of when more videos come out, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. Once again, I am sorry I haven't released any videos recently. It was due to some family issues. But now I'll have more time on my schedule to work on videos again. I've also started streaming more consistently on Twitch again. I'll go ahead and throw up that information up on the screen. And once again, if you guys could hit that like button, I really, really do appreciate that. It does help the video a lot. But that's going to be it for the video. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all again next time. Oh, and happy holidays, everyone.